Welcome to Tuesday, the second day of September 2025. Your Day with a Podcast brought to you by the Advocates Injury Attorneys. If you've been injured in an accident, don't face it alone. Get an experienced local Wyoming attorney on your side. Free consultations at WyomingAdvocates.com or call 307-800-1952. You deserve an advocate. Well, the weather is going to be about as you'd expect it for early September. Beautiful shot there of a big field of sunflowers. And this time of year, this is a pattern where you start to see less thunderstorms. We're not done with thunderstorms by any means, but we just kind of slowly see not nearly as many and not nearly as many opportunities. We start to see less in the way of subtropical moisture available. We start to see these Canadian cool fronts bring drier air into the region, and we have longer nights, shorter days, and we gradually see temperatures start to cool off a bit as we go and progress through the month of September. This is why September can sometimes just bring delightful weather at times, and it will. We will see some moisture this week in the far western and southwestern parts of the United States. We're going to see some moisture in the Great Basin and even into parts of California and parts of Arizona, as we've got a little bit of tropical action off the west coast of Mexico. We'll show you that here in a minute. Elsewhere across a lot of the Rockies and the Central High Plains, there just won't be a lot happening here for the next couple to 3 days. Then, as we have been discussing last week about a big push of much cooler Canadian air heading into the midsection of the U.S., it really will. It looks like the core of the coldest air relative to average will be in the upper plains, the Great Lakes, but some of the cool air will push all the way westward to along and east of the Continental Divide, leading to a cool down late into the week and for the start of the weekend. If we go back and rewind a little bit to late last week when we had that subtropical moisture around, a couple of shots from late last week and Saturday where that moisture hung on. Now, we're not going to see much of this in many areas, but you can see the moisture with a heavier shower there. And then as we went into Friday and Saturday, the moisture hung on, especially east of the divide, to keep showers and thunderstorms going and making for great cloudscapes all across the area. There are a shot along Interstate 25 of some thunderstorms on Saturday, then a great shot of thunderstorm activity that developed Saturday evening, but they came to be more isolated. That's why you have these beautiful cloud photos. You had more space between them as the air started to get drier. Thunderstorms and showers Saturday hanging on up into the Black Hills of South Dakota, then down into the Front Range near Monument, Colorado. And finally, some rain late last week up in Platte County, Wyoming in some areas from that tail end of the moisture that moved on through. Beautiful rainbow on Saturday at Curtin County State Park. And then the moon going into its next phase. When we take a look at the satellite imagery, you can see that there's not a lot going on. Now, we will see this system affect us here later on. This is the upper level low up in Canada. You can see we've got some moisture down here in Mexico and Arizona. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But across a lot of the rest of the United States, there's not a lot going on. So here's the cloudiness associated with that upper low in Canada. Here's that subtropical moisture that's trapped down here in the southwestern United States. Then a pocket of some pretty dry, stable air that is in between. We've got this low off the coast of Washington that's just going to kind of spin around and stall there and be there for quite a while. There it is off the coast of Seattle. It's really got nowhere to go, kind of trapped underneath this high pressure ridge. Now, here is a tropical disturbance. We'll talk about that in a minute off the coast of west of Mexico. And you can see the trough of low pressure wanting to carve out a low across the central and eastern United States. Overall, even though we've got these lows here, we've got high pressure in the west, and that's causing the jet stream to take a dip. And we take a look at the precipitable water for today, something you don't see very often. Look at that moisture in California, parts of central and western Arizona, across a good part of Mexico. This is trapped underneath the ridge of high pressure. And we also have tropical activity forming here off the coast of Mexico heading north. Generally, drier air, though, covers a lot of the nation. So this is where we get into just kind of a typical September day. Now, there will be a little bit of thunderstorm activity today, These are where thunderstorms may pop later this afternoon and evening. We've got a little bit of activity along the higher terrain, but look at this. Back into California, even Southern California, far southwest areas of Arizona, then back down here into Mexico here. This is going to be an area where showers and thunderstorms for the next few days will be occurring with daytime heating, but a lot of less activity elsewhere. So this is for today. This is for Wednesday. And this is for Thursday. So you can see some areas west of the divide, even into the Four Corners area, back into the Sierra Nevada, and even into the Cascades. We're going to have some thunderstorms with the heat of the day, drier, more stable conditions elsewhere with just a few isolated thunderstorms. As we go into the middle of the week, cooler, drier air gets pushed into the nation's midsection. This is why. This is a heck of a low for early September up over Ontario. One area that may see snow this week is Ontario, Canada, up here in this area right here, right underneath the coldest part of the low. So with high pressure along the west coast, the jet stream is going to look like this, opening the door to much cooler Canadian air for the second half of the week. Temperature anomalies by tomorrow at noon Mountain Time look like this. Here you can see the cold over the Great Lakes in Ontario, and you can see the cooler air is backed up along the divide. So Wednesday looks like this. Thursday, the colder air is more east. We actually have a little bit of a Chinooking effect here, but look what happens on Friday. It backs further westward. So basically Wednesday through Friday along and east of the divide, it's going to cool off. And then this cold air will then descend across the rest of the nation, making for a very pleasant September weekend next week for a lot of the central and eastern United States. High pressure here in the Pacific Northwest and western Canada will keep a temperature anomaly there warmer than average, at least through this upcoming weekend. That is for Saturday. You can see the cool air spreading further south and east. When we look at the precipitation chances between now and Saturday, we showed you where the thunderstorms are going to be. So this is where we're going to possibly have the best chance of measurable precipitation. And the European model here doesn't do thunderstorms very well in terms of the moisture it's going to get. There will be more rain that will fall here than it's showing, and probably in parts of the Great Basin in Arizona as well. You may notice this, though, right here, this heavier rain down in northwest Mexico. That's part of what is right now 12E. This is a tropical depression that's forming here that will likely become a tropical storm. We've got a hurricane out here further west, but that's going to basically just drift off into the Pacific and at least here in the next couple of days not be much of a factor. But this is going to come up like this. As you can see, it'll become a tropical storm and then by this weekend curve up into northwest Mexico. Why am I showing you this? Well, this moisture could intrude into the weekend and early next week in parts of the western United States. We're just going to kind of have to see where the remnants of this tropical storm end up this weekend. That's something that we're going to keep an eye on. Then as we go further out, this is a week from today. We still generally have a low off the coast of British Columbia, but we don't have the high. It's breaking down a little bit, and we're going to start to see the weather patterns begin to move again into a different phase about 10 days from now. So for the next week, we're just going to kind of go through the motions. We'll have this moisture in the far west and southwest, the big cool down in the nation's midsection, and kind of average temperatures in between. Once we get into later next week, after next Tuesday, we see that trough beginning to move. So look at the difference between Tuesday of next week and next Friday. Well, what you notice is that trough gets pushed off the Pacific Northwest coast and comes into the Northern Rockies. So this will be a cool front coming in for the weekend of the 13th and 14th. Now, it doesn't look terribly strong, but it will bring cooler weather and showers into the Intermountain West and the Pacific Northwest and parts of the Northern Rockies. But I also want you to take a look at what's going on up north. Notice up here we have a stronger trough forming in Alaska and a stronger jet stream wind forming right here. So this is something third week of September we'll need to keep an eye on and see what develops. So the weekend of the 13th, 14th is when we'll have kind of a mid-September cold front and that will bring cooler weather and a fall-like feel to the Intermountain West. We'll just have to see if it maintains this strength, gets weaker or stronger, but that's about the time of the month that you would expect a little bit of a stronger front to come on through. So all in all, what it looks like over the next 2 weeks is exactly kind of what you would expect in a typical September pattern. Have yourself a good Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.